So my name is Michael Brooks. I'm the executive director for the National Association of Collegiate Esports. With us, and on my screen, he's right next to me, but I'm not too sure for everyone else. But we have our competition manager. That's JJ Myers, who's a recent addition to the national office. JJ, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm JJ Myers. I've helped build two different esports programs at two institutions. I first started at Hawkeye Community College in early 2018. I moved to East Bay University in Virginia Beach, and I helped with their program up until about March when I joined the national office to help run competition.
And I thought his insight working at two different campuses, one a 2-year institution, one a 4-year institution, two different regions of the United States, one's in the Midwest, one was obviously in the East Coast, right along Virginia Beach, would be important, especially as we open up to questions at the later part of this session. Now, if I did this right in terms of sharing my screen, you should see this blue background title page, the workshop, Collegiate Esports, let's do a deep dive. And that is really the purpose of this session, is to do a deep dive on the real tactical information of esports, what other colleges and universities are doing in this space. If you already have an active esports program, then what your peers are doing and where the space is going here in the short term, right? Obviously, long-term predictions are difficult to make in an industry that changes so rapidly, like esports does. But we'll try our best to give you at least, next few years, what's going on, as well as sharing data from what NACE is doing and how we're reacting to the changing environment. So if I'm doing this again right, you should be seeing the table of contents. JJ, can you confirm that you're seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. So this is what we're hoping to cover here in this presentation. And we're going to go through some of this fairly quickly as well. Like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some of the graphics or anything like that. I'm really going to focus on the core issues so that we can open up to comments and questions. The first thing that I wanted to point out is we are limited in the amount of time that we have here. And this is like asking someone in 45 minutes, please explain to us athletics, right? Nobody could do that. It's just too broad of a subject. That is certainly true for esports as well. But if you are interested in learning more, if you're a NACE member, if you're not a NACE member, I encourage you to join our national convention, where we have a ton of professional development, nearly all led by institutions and staff who are part or who have active esport programs, if not for years now. Please do so, right? It is meant to be educational. We have certainly a member track and a non-member track. The non-member track is really geared towards institutions, helping them get any and all information they need to be successful within esports. I will go back to this page. I think this presentation will be shared out with every participant as well. If I'm recalling correctly from Amy Stover, but that is the link right there. Again, I will put it in the chat as well. Once we get a little further down, just as a reminder. But it is this July 20th through the 23rd. Again, it's open to everyone. That is a link to our announcement. We'll see links for the member side and the non-member side. Just note that the non-member side is really focused on the professional development, education, real tactical guides and information on starting an esports program. So I didn't say what NACE was, and hopefully by this point in time, most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with NACE. That's short for the National Association of Collegiate Esports. We are specific to the varsity space of collegiate esports, and we are by far the largest organization in North America, again, made up of, led by, and created by the actual institutions who are involved in the space. Currently, NACE has well over 200 member institutions, primarily in the United States. This graphic here is actually a little bit old, but it still gives you the right idea. And that is to say, most of our membership is in the Midwest and along the East Coast, although we have a much faster growth rate actually now starting to pick up along the West Coast. And we do have some Canadian member institutions as well. But we're headquartered here in Kansas City. We actually share office space with the NAI national office. In case you ever wanted to visit or you're visiting the NAI, you can also visit us. It is literally you walking like 5 feet away. You'll find our section of the office. But yes, and we do currently count for the majority, nearly all of the varsity programs that exist. So when I say varsity, I think it's important. It's not like athletics, right? Definitions aren't as clear as they are in traditional athletics. And for us, when we look at the term varsity, we're actually trying to measure up a program against a few check marks. And these are the typical check marks that we look at for an esports program. One, is this led by staff or is it led by students? Do they have a dedicated space on campus with equipment for the teams and the students to practice and compete from? Are they actively recruiting students to come to the institution and represent the school in intercollegiate competition? Are they able to agree and abide by our bylaws, which is, again, built and made by our member institutions? They're the minimum expectations of how a varsity program is supposed to operate in the space. Is this for full-time students or not? And is there a path to graduation for those students in those esport programs? I would say these are very, very basic guidelines, right? And much less than anything you would see in traditional athletics. And that is quite intentional, right? We know this is a developing space. Schools are entering the esports industry at varying levels. And we're trying to provide a path forward for as many programs as possible so that we can grow them to be successful, if not start them off immediately from day one as what we call a healthy program. To do so, we go through a lot of different things, and I'm happy to share all this with you, but we provide a ton of guides, blueprints that are all taken from varsity programs over the last 4 years. This is to provide you as an administrator a guide for how other schools have started esport programs and how you might as well, but it's certainly not something that we would say is written in stone. Right. This is an average of the survey results that we've gotten over the last 4 years. It gives you that baseline to judge against and to edit off of for the needs of your own institution. So really don't take this as something that's written in stone that you have to do it this way. This is just showing, again, that average of surveys from pretty much every varsity program that's existed so far. And this is just quickly going to show you just kind of snippets of what that looks like. If you're interested in the areas that we cover, it's quite a number there. But it covers everything from budgets to the actual equipment to services that industry providers that partner with NACE provide. And so forth. Let me go back real quick. We also have facility guides as well. So if you're talking about the layout of an esports facility, right? The marketing term for that is esport arena. I don't want to put in people's mind when I say the word arena that we're thinking like a basketball arena or anything like that. What we're really talking about at the end of the day with what most esport programs have is a computer lab. And it's a high functioning computer lab with great gaming equipment, with obviously cosmetics on the wall and all the other artwork a school might do to make the space look attractive to students and professional in its layout. But in function, it's a computer lab. I mean, most, if not all, there's a few exceptions there, of esports are all played on a gaming PC. That's just a high functioning computer with a powerful graphics card for the most part, right? And we certainly have those guides there. So what I would encourage you to do if you're interested is just to reach out to us. We share this information with everyone. You don't have to be a NACE member to see this. If you're really just interested in educating yourself, learning about what's happening in space, getting the guides in hand so that you can explore yourself, or if you already have plans, just reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to share that information with you. And JJ, if you would do me a solid, just in the chat, if you'd put my email address, your email address, and Emily's email address in there, just so people have that for reference sake, that'd be
Sure.
fantastic. And again, I said I'd be going through this fairly quickly, and that's just to cover as much ground as we can in the short time that we have. So we participated with a group called Esports Foundry and brought in a lot of our member institutions to provide a more robust survey so that we can get a good grasp of at least what esport programs look like and how they're functioning in the first semester of this last academic year. So I'm talking about last fall. And it's important for you to realize, or at least have an understanding, that esports fundamentally, for the most part, operates on the semester basis as opposed to the traditional athletic fall, winter, spring model, right? So you'd have 2 semesters worth of competition. You can think of those as seasons, if you will, where typically you'll have different games fielding competition, regular season and postseason, in different semesters of that academic year. And thank you for adding that, JJ. This is some of the key takeaways. I'm not sharing everything because it's a lot. It's roughly around 20 pages worth of data, but this is some information which I think is pretty darn important, at least for someone to grasp what an esports program typically looks like. So the average program size is 25 to 30 students, and it is on a linear growth rate. Typically, an esports program is adding 15 students per year. So if you're wondering how many students should we plan for in our first year, how quickly can we grow our program? I mean, that's the running average there is right. You're going to start 25 to 30 students. That's typically 2 to 3 different esports you're going to be fielding teams in with maybe some additional backup teams. So unlike traditional athletics, or maybe like traditional athletics, if you look at varsity and junior varsity, right? I know many NAIA institutions have that. That is somewhat true in esports as well, in dynamic. But yeah, you can have multiple Rocket League teams. You can have multiple Overwatch teams and so on and so forth. There's very few games, if any, that have a restriction on the number of teams that you can field. And certainly NACE is reacting to that as well and providing opportunities for as many teams as our schools are fielding at that varsity level and as many esports where there's enough teams for us to have a robust regular season and postseason of competition. Um, I know everyone was impacted by COVID. NACE and esports is certainly included in that, but I think the difference there is a fundamental one, and that's how competition is done. So when COVID was really starting to trigger, and this was in March of last year, our response to that and our board of directors in particular was to provide an exemption for students so that they can play remotely. That is to say that they don't have to compete on campus in their esports facility. It's all online, of course, so there's no travel really involved, but that students would be allowed to compete from their own residences, which is certainly a wrench in terms of the campus and the institution organizing those students, but certainly doable. And we were able to continue full competition. And in fact, this academic year, all competition was online, still remote. And so esports for institutions wasn't paused. It wasn't stopped. It continued to grow and grow and grow. Well, I know many athletic programs were navigating these difficult times, but for esports, this was a tremendous growth period. A lot of institutions looked at esports as a way to keep their students engaged, to keep intercollegiate competition going, and to do so in something that packs a bigger punch than its cost, right? Because we're talking about the typical esports program being a lower cost endeavor than most traditional athletic programs, whatever sport you would want to mention there. Um, Average facility, and we share this in our documents, right? Roughly 20 to 25 gaming stations. You can think of these as computer stations, if you will. Newer, larger stations or facilities tend to trend larger. And I think that's a response of institutions realizing that esport programs can grow rapidly, and so they're planning for future growth from day one. That historically has been true, right? Most esport programs would plan for the year that they're entering, and without further thought in how this program would grow in year 2 and year 3 and so on and so forth, right? And that's been kind of an issue within esports, is a lack of foresight, of lack of forward planning in these esport programs. The general saying is esports on campus will grow as fast as an administration wants it to grow. Very few schools are hitting issues in terms of hitting recruitment goals. And it's simply a function of a large population of prospective students who want to play esports. That is their passion, that is their interest. But still, even though esports has grown tremendously in the scholastic space, there's still relatively few opportunities for those students to compete. And so it is just a large recruitment pool with a few, number of opportunities there. And you'll see that note right there, right? Lack of planning on future facilities. That's a general issue within esports. Um, are these facilities open to the whole student body or just closed to the varsity esports program? Well, typically they're closed just to the varsity students, right? These are not open to the general student body. It's not open to community members. There have been some institutions that have explored that, especially pre-COVID, as a way to monetize these spaces by charging some nominal fee, like $4 an hour, just throwing that number out there, as a way to provide a revenue stream for the program. But obviously during COVID, that all went away. But is looking at the way that you have equipment and resources and opportunities and trying to figure out how we can get the greatest return for your program. Financials, most college esports programs are reporting that their programs are a strong revenue generating and cash flow positive program for their institution. This is simply, it's a low cost endeavor, right? You're depreciating equipment over 3 to 5 years, depending on what you're doing to upgrade that equipment, specifically the graphic cards themselves. And you're fielding multiple teams, typically 2 students per computer, um, as you as you schedule out the use of your space, right? It's no different than scheduling out multiple teams or groups to utilize your basketball facility, for example, right? It's a dynamic of scheduling to get the greatest use out of the same space. And if we look at the budgets for these programs, and this is actually something that's viewed as a negative, most esport programs would describe themselves as underfunded for what they're doing. And this is typically hitting staff is the biggest question, right? It's a small number of staff members for a very large number of students, and all that goes into that. So that's one note I would ask you to consider as maybe you explore an esports program or thinking of your existing esports program today. In case you're wondering about salaries, right? We just did an average salary survey across that, and an average esports director is currently earning between 35 to 40,000, and that's just in salary. That's not looking at benefits or anything like that. Just to give you a point of reference, most schools, their frequency competition is similar to traditional athletics. That is, they're playing each team is usually playing at least one official match a week. They're probably practicing and skirmishing beyond that, but that's typically the frequency of teams and official competition. It doesn't mean that it can't have additional competition they're competing in. That's certainly true as well. It doesn't mean like, for example, if you're a NACE member, that you're restricted just to NACE competition. In esports, it's very normal for schools to be members or participants in many different leagues, and they just look at that as a function of trying to figure out their schedule for the semester. And at this point in time, well, here's exactly it, right? Most programs report that they participate within 5 different leagues in the academic year, and that's for the same esport title. That's the same team. And I'm still letting people join, so this is fantastic. So while that seems to be a lot for a lot of people, right? You're participating in 5 different tournaments for the same team in a year. What they're reporting, though, and this is primarily, I think, impacted by the ease of getting into competition, right? That you're not traveling, so you don't have any of those expenses or logistics to worry about. And it's not something that's physically exhausting, right? Esports is played remotely. You're playing with a digital avatar. It's inputs into a controller or a keyboard that you can do more, and there is room for more tournaments according to these schools. The last thing I'll point out here on this slide is looking at the esports program and the distribution of the number of students within those esports programs. And you'll see, right, you have between 0 to 15, that's about 14% of respondents, 21%, 15 to 30, 19%, 30 and 45, and so on and so forth. But then this is kind of startling, and I think this is what you're looking at here is programs that are more mature, right? 3 to 4 year old programs at this point in time. That's pretty much the oldest programs then in the country. But you're seeing as programs mature, they continually add more teams, more students to their esports program, and hopefully the support and resources needed to do that. But the overwhelming response, I shouldn't say overwhelming, but the majority response maybe of all these different brackets here is that esport programs themselves are 60 students or over. And this is, again, all at the varsity level. Let me open up chat. So if I see questions here, I'm not missing anything. And yes, I will do everything I can, certainly, to make sure everyone has a copy of the presentation. It's kind of a robust file, so we might have to figure out maybe a Google Drive or something to get it into your hands. Kevin, hey Kevin, nice to see you. Kevin is shared some of his institution's growth in terms of esports programs, and a number of other people are talking about it as well for their own institutions. So this, I don't read too hard into this, right? But there was an extrapolation from the data, and I know it's a lot of text. I'll just summarize the high component of this. If you're looking at the average incoming class of 15 students and you're multiplying that by the average cost of a public school, just to give you a point of references on where these numbers came from, right, which is $20,770 per year, Then you multiply that by the retention rate these schools are reporting, which is a 93% retention rate, which is very high. You arrive basically at an annual gross return to the institution of roughly $290,000. And again, this is missing a lot of things, right? It's missing the cost of education, it's missing staffing costs, right? It's just looking at gross numbers on the inflow. It's not looking at all the things that would track this. So do not consider this like for reference a profit or anything. We're just talking about large numbers and only on the numbers coming in. So if you multiply that by a 4-year student, right, a typical 4-year pursuing a 4-year institution, student pursuing a 4-year degree, and that's just multiplying it by 4, you get $1.1 million. And you kind of get the idea, right? On the other side, in expenses, the number of expenses you have for an esports program are fairly limited, and it's really a function of you're on campus, you're not traveling for the most part, your staff is pretty low at this point in time. I actually think that's an issue. I'd love to see more schools putting more staff in to support these programs than anything else, but it is fairly limited at this time. And you remember earlier that most schools reported that they are underfunded for what they're doing. But this is a function of why a lot of schools have been so excited about esports, is because of the overall numbers returning to their institution. And yes, we do have a few roadmaps to help out with this. That's the earlier documents I shared, or snippets of those documents. I'm happy to share those documents with anyone who asks. I got 2 of my staff members here that we added our email addresses in chat. JJ, if you'd periodically repost that just as people join so they can see that, just shoot us an email and we will send you as much information as possible. At the minimum, we want this information in the hands of people that can make decisions, right? Whether you're a member of NACE or not, we really don't mind. We'd rather have people as educated as possible from what's actually happening on campuses around the country. So this is what I meant by COVID, right? Where esports continue to grow. This little pie chart right here, and obviously this is still from that Esports Foundry survey that we helped put together, where 70% of respondents reported that even during COVID, their esports programs grew in terms of the number of students who are participating. Yes, about 11.9% shrunk in the number of students, and roughly, let's say round up and say 20% didn't change. But that is pretty startling to see that these esport programs, even when the campus might be shut down, right? Even when staff is dispersed and students are dispersed around the country, wherever they're residing, that most programs were still plugging away and growing their services. Going to go through some of this really quick, just to catch up on time here. But this is from NACE. This is our members that we surveyed. Roughly 126 schools at this point in time responded to this survey. And this is showing you what esports schools are fielding teams in. And that's this left side here of the Excel document, right? Where you see the common denominators at the very top in that bright green, right? That is the expectation. If you had only 3 games on campus and we just had to randomly guess, we would guess that those 3 games were the games that you were fielding teams in. And as you go down the list, you start seeing it decrease in terms of the overall population within NACE who are fielding teams. 126, that's a little bit over half of our membership, but it's enough for you to extrapolate information from. And then when we're asking, well, okay, let's open it up. Right now, NACE operates off the semester basis, where we have an off-season and on-season dynamic for everything that we do in terms of competition, right? Do you want to keep that model? Do you want more competition, even in the same game title? And the responses that we got are indicated by this pie chart. Roughly between the dark blue, 38.9%, said they like the on-season, off-season approach. The dark red there is saying, hey, we want a semester format, but we want games to actually repeat. We want a Rocket League in the first semester, and we want Rocket League in the second semester. And then in the orange, right, is we want competition in a singular esport title to run the full academic year. And in function, that would mean the entire first semester would be a regular season, and the second semester would be a postseason. And we've made some decisions based off this data, which I believe I can share with you here. So this is still being worked out, but this is going to go live to our membership this week, right? And some of this stuff, don't hold us to it because we're still updating things. We actually had a competition council meeting just before this meeting where we went over some of these items. But we're looking at basically a hybrid between those two largest segments of that survey response, which is we were going to have 2 semesters of competition still, but game titles will repeat. And schools are able to opt in and opt out of each semester based upon their own needs on campus. If you're thinking about, okay, full league format, that is a regular season, postseason type format where you're competing against a school, another school in your group once a week leading into a postseason, you'll see that we have Rocket League, Overwatch, Call of Duty, and Valorant, right? Those are some of the largest concentrations of our schools fielding teams in. And you'll see, when does registration open for schools to sign up? Or I'm sorry, that's the deadline. We're actually working through on the open date right now. When does competition start for the regular season? When do playoffs start? When is the championship? And you get the idea here in this bottom chart here on the actual segments of competition. And schools will have the ability, because this will repeat from first semester to second semester, to decide for themselves when they have the bandwidth to compete and when they're able to compete. They can choose, both semesters. They can choose one semester. That's totally fine. And it's meant to give more autonomy, more control, more decision making to each individual institution. And then we also wanted to include some other games, right? Last academic year, this one that just concluded, we had 9, actually, we had more than that. I'm sorry. I think we had 12 off the top of my head, different esport game titles that we ran competition in. Those haven't gone away, but we decided to change the format of those. Instead of a league format where you have an opponent a week, we changed those into circuits, and that's represented right here, where during a specific segment in time, it's like a mini tournament, but expended over weeks, right? If not months, maybe. And then one-off tournaments, which is really going to be concise, right? You're going to have those 1 to 2 day tournaments, maybe a little bit more depending on the number of teams, but you're going to have those repeat in the circuit format. And these might just be once a semester, right? We're still trying to figure out details around this, but in structure, this is what we're thinking moving forward. In terms of what we did last year, if you're curious to know the game titles that we ran competition in, here you go. Again, this is last academic year, broke it down by semester and what games we fielded competition in. This is obviously going to change for this next coming academic year that starts in August, but I thought it was important to show you the games that had collegiate support in terms of competition at the varsity level. This I'm going to go through really quick. This is a snapshot of what does collegiate competition look like? What does a championship look like? Well, we completed our championship in April, right? And for us, this was the first time we actually brought in a high school organization to participate within our championships in its own competition, right? They weren't playing college teams; they were playing other high school teams, but this was their national championship, and that was our partners over at NACE, the North American Scholastic Esports Federation. So roughly 3 days of competition. Friday was for high school. Saturday and Sunday was for NACE, for our collegiate championships. Those are the game titles that we ran championships in, represented on the right-hand side of this. This is the total number of teams that participate in competition throughout the whole of competition. I'm not just talking about the championships here. I'm talking about since the start of the regular season for these game titles. For us, this was a big growth. And I think this is of interest to anyone who's looking at, well, what is the audience size? What's the fan base? So the first semester, we had a viewership of roughly 60,000 viewers, right? This last championship that just ended in April, we had 450,000 live viewers for our Saturday and Sunday live championships. And then at the same time throughout those, which we ran concurrent, a rolling schedule of competition, we had roughly 20,000 people watching any particular game at any point in time. These are the different groups that we worked with. Again, I'm going to kind of scroll through this, but it was important that we in esports, most schools don't just look at just competition. They're also looking to expand other opportunities. And we see a number of varsity programs work with other schools within their institution to create academic programming. This is around video engineering or video and audio engineering. This is around journalism. This is around sports management, event management. Even more unique things like partnering with the School of Optometry to study how people visually consume data on a screen. We see all sorts of different things, but a ton of partnerships when it comes to journalism and with engineering specifically. We see a lot of that, and that's tying in specific academic programming. We keep that concurrent with our broadcast as well to provide those type of learnings as well. And this includes things even around job prep, right? How do you present yourself during an interview? What are the questions that you should ask? How are you going to be asked in a remote environment? How do you put the best foot forward? If you're wondering what esports competition looks like, you can go to Twitch, you can go to YouTube, type in esports, you'll see a billion different videos, right? And these are just screenshots. But yeah, you're looking at the game, you're looking at the players competing. On right here, you might have casters talking about what's going on in the game, and these are for a little bit higher, but most schools will have casters. So when you think about recruiting students, you're not just recruiting students who are going to compete and represent your institution competitively. Most schools are now also thinking about all of the support elements that make that possible, right? Your shoutcasters, your analysts, even your team captains, your equipment managers. They look at esports as an opportunity to recruit students for a variety of needs, with students with strengths in a lot of different areas, right? It's a little bit different than athletics in that you are scholarshiping in many cases shoutcasters. These are these individuals who are providing the sports, the color commentary of the game, so that when a person's watching, they get better insight into the strategy and mindset of these players. You see the exact same thing here with casters, right? And that's again just with the overlays, so you're getting scores and totals and everything like that. I don't think I'll look at this, but this, well, maybe very quickly, right? I'm gonna go ahead and mute that. But this is what happens in terms of our championships, like at DreamHack, for instance, when you could do this in person, right? We'll actually fly out all the teams, we cover all the travel expenses, but we put it in a larger festival-like environment for the teams because we're trying to create a great student experience and also a way to provide assets to help the entire association out, right? And so that's this really, really quick snippet of that, but I figure it's the quickest way to showcase what's going on here. Let me bring this back up because I accidentally hit the escape key here. And that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we went through everything fairly quickly, but we just have a limited amount of time here. And I wanted to make sure to show you really quickly what this looks like. Again, I know JJ has been posting our emails here. If you have any interest in seeing any of this data, and we'll send you everything, we'll bombard you with information, and we're happy to get on a phone call and talk with you or any of your staff through any of those items or anything else that you might have in terms of questions. Please reach out to us, right? We don't charge anything for that. Nothing. We're a membership association. We want to educate and inform institutions to make the best possible decisions for their own campuses. Now, I know we're running low on time, and we've roughly got about 12 minutes. I'm going to look through the chat here to see if there's any questions that have popped up here, but I wanted to, whoops, and it went away. So let me go back here and open it up. If you have a question, just so we're not all talking on top of each other, if you'd want to write that up in the chat, we'll be able to get to it and try to address as many of those questions as possible. And some of these questions I might direct to other team members if I feel like they might be able to better answer it than I. So does NACE have a roadmap with information on how to get school started, do's and don'ts? Absolutely. So I showed some screenshots of those documents, but those are much more robust documents. We're talking about pages upon pages of information. I will send that to you. Any of my staff members will send that to you upon request. And happy to, again, schedule a meeting with you or anyone else you think you need to bring on from your side, from your team, just to make sure you understand the information that's put in front of you. We don't want to throw you into the deep end of here's this bunch of data and have you try to figure it all yourself. We're happy to provide some of the democratize, if you will, information so that it's really usable, whether your knowledge on esports is high or low. COVID paused our edition of esports at Union College, but we're working to bring that conversation back to the table in hopes of making it a reality on our campus in the future. Thanks for all work you do with the NAIA and our institutions. Fantastic. Happy to help if we can, right? We obviously are an outside organization from the internal decision-making powers that be at your institution, but anytime that we can step in there and help, we will. I mean, we work on behalf of our members. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. There's a question on strategies for recruiting students. JJ, I actually think that might be better suited for you because you were a coach at two different institutions. You built two different varsity esport programs.
So for me, the biggest thing was making sure that students knew that we existed. So there's a lot of like branding and marketing that go into that. One is like I was making sure that we were streaming all of our content just so people know that we exist. I got in front of the high schoolers any chance I got. I had regular visits with the local high schools in the area, especially out in Iowa, where I was driving out once a month at these schools and getting in front of anybody that would listen to me. Organizing local events for the high school students is a big one. Creating environments where they can come in for tournament play or even running some kind of camps. But a lot of it is just getting in front of these students to make sure they know you exist, because esports programs are sprouting up, but I feel like a lot have not maybe done a great job of showcasing the fact that they have a program. Like, everybody knows they have a football team, but nobody knows that they have, say, a League of Legends team or a Rocket League team. So you need to get out in front of these students. You need to let them know what you're doing and how you're going to do it. And when you have an arena, like, once you get a student into your arena, you can really show off like that gym. It's very impressive sight for them.
So what institution has done and by the way, before I mention, there are a number of services, just like traditional athletics, that provide esport camps, right? Combines, just database of prospective recruits, right? Like NCSA and Be Recruited. Those names you're probably familiar with in the traditional athletic world. They're also in esports, right? If you're on those platforms, you can just click esports and you'll see all those individual institutions as well. But there are a number like Stay Plugged In, AVGL with Intel, I think Intel Insights. I'm trying to get the name correct off the top of my head, but there's a number and events that we partner with to run combines that our schools are all able to participate and encouraged to participate into. But yeah, it's making sure that it's known, making sure as you have your admissions department or marketing department promoting your institution, that they're also making sure that people are aware of their esports programs. Most schools will have an interest form on their esports page on their school website. And that just helps, just like athletics, right? You're interested in playing here. Let's make sure we get the information relevant for us to, one, make a determination if we are interested in talking to you, also how to talk to you. Yeah, one institution has done a great job of plugging into the broadcasting and support staff element of recruitment. So there are a number of institutions that have done a great job. And I actually think this is a growing trend that more schools are going to be adopting. Typically a school, when they first start their esports program, they're focusing, and probably rightfully so, on the competitive elements, right? We need a coach, we need a space, we need students to compete. They're focusing on those three items, generally speaking, if I'm painting with a broad brush. And as a school matures and they think, well, we want to get this out into our student body, we want to get this out to our fan base, we want to make sure that we're competing at the highest level that we can, that's when they start looking at support elements and trying to figure out, where do you bring those skills, where do you bring those at that expertise. And for a lot of schools, it's still looking back at students to lead that initiative. It's not necessarily hiring more staff, right? And Boise State has done a fantastic job of, I think, the largest broadcasting team in the country. But you have a number of institutions. ECPI has a broadcasting team. Shenandoah Valley has another broadcasting team, and they're recruiting students specifically for that, right? They're trying to find students that can do it.
Something to add to that is they're not just looking for shoutcasters, right? You need the shoutcasters to be in front of the camera, but like behind the scenes, you need technical directors, you need video editing, you need graphic design. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to this they're pulling from the general body or recruiting for. I've seen schools offering similar scholarships to players to come in and handle the graphic design load, handle the video editing load, because a lot of this stuff it helps market it much better, and there's a lot of room for assistance across a broad degree of skills.
So another question that popped up is we are starting esports in the fall of 2021 at Lawrence Tech University. We have about 15 students added to our fall roster. It's good to see our data is somewhat accurate in terms of the average, starting size. What is the one thing you would say to these kids during their initial athlete orientation? For me, and again, this is a focus on the varsity space, right? Are we at the same level of professionalism as traditional athletics? I would say no. We're a lot better than what's out there in the space, but we're building towards that, right? The expectation that you show up to practice on time, that you compete to the fullest ability, that you don't give up if you're getting really badly beat, right? That you're representing something bigger than yourself and you're being held to a higher standard. That's something that I think every school needs to iterate, right? Esports for really everyone across the country, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a staff member, whether you're a student, it's still that infancy point, right? Where people are gravitating away from, this is something I just played for fun with my friends, to this is something I'm doing with a purpose. And if it's if the institution, if the coach, if the staff isn't supporting that, right? If they're not teaching that this is a tool for everything else the institution wants you to walk away with after your career here at this institution, we've kind of done a disservice to those the students, and you created more problems yourself. So I think expectations have to be set from day one, and you have to uphold those expectations as well. But that's just my opinion right there. And I will jot in some of the different websites you can look at if you're looking at external recruitment websites. That was another question there. Is eligibility run through the NAI and ECP software for continuing students? The answer is no. Eligibility is ran through NACE. It's not as stringent as the NAI or what you would see in the NCA. And I think it's important for you to understand for NACE, the majority of our institutions are now NCA institutions. Up until about 2 years ago, it was majority NAI institutions. So we're working over two different populations who approach eligibility in two different ways. But for us, ours is very minimal, right? So you have to be a full-time student. You have 5 years of eligibility. That's another key difference between esports and traditional athletics. And what we default back to, but we do cross-verify, is that students in the esports program beyond the full-time status component are also abiding by their institution's own eligibility policies. So there's no national necessarily, besides the full-time status component, there's no national eligibility issues or rules or benchmarks that we check across. We're actually checking to make sure each institution is upholding their own rules. And that's done through something that we call the Academic Eligibility Certificate, which is a fully online system. Can student athletes win and take prize money while playing for the institution? The answer is yes. We don't really get involved in that. We don't have restrictions on how that's done. The only caveat there is that the money has to be reported to the department in charge of the esports program. We want there to be a full level of transparency. We don't want dark money in envelopes moving hands, right? Because there is a lot of cash cup tournaments out there, right? NACE in the past and actually moving forward, we're actually looking at this really hardly and providing scholarship pools, right? About 2 years ago, we were doing $50,000 prize pools per esport. This time we're looking at something probably a lot less than that, but still, it is a fundamental question that you as an institution need to figure out. You need to establish a policy. How do you and your teams want to handle if you win prizing? And that doesn't have to be cash. It could be scholarship prizing. It could be a keyboard or a mouse or headset. That's probably predominantly the most prizes that are out there. But how do you want to handle that as a program? You need to have that policy set at the very beginning. Is there an instruction manual on how to get started? JJ, if you wouldn't mind putting our contact information there, again, just reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to send that to you. Thank you. Yeah. And if you're wondering where that is, it's in the chat for this this session. And I think we got through. Let me scroll up, see if I missed any questions real quickly here. I am not. I'm wondering, there's a reaction thing here.
What websites or places do you use to identify prospective coaches and directors? That's the one I missed.
Yeah, can you repeat that question, JJ?
What websites or places do you advertise to identify prospective coaches or directors?
That is difficult. So we do have some templates actually taken from real job descriptions from member institutions. We try to be careful with that, right? Because we don't want to say it has to be exactly like that. Really, you need to decide for yourselves. In Twitterverse, there's still that running trend of esport coaches and directors being underpaid for what they're doing. Honestly, I think everyone feels that, but whether there is some measure of truth to that, I think there probably is. So we do share that, but yeah, you're either looking at one of two things. You're either looking for a really good administrator, someone who's good at student recruitment, who's good with the academic policies of your institution, who's good with scheduling, the logistical items. You're looking for someone with strengths in those areas, or you're looking for someone with a high level of game expertise. Now, I will tell you, for the most part, institutions tend to gear more towards the administrator, which then by default makes them rely more on team captains to really be the game experts, or maybe bringing outside remote contractor coaches, right? There's a number of services that provide online remote coaching for that game expertise. because to find someone who's not only a good administrator but also has a large level expertise in all these different game titles, what you're talking about is a unicorn, right? It's kind of like in traditional athletics. Can you find a coach who can coach every sport you have? The answer is no, and nobody expects that. So there's no reason in esports you should expect the same thing. So you're really looking for one or the other. Most institutions tend to gear towards the administrator, someone who can recruit, work with the students, make sure everything runs smoothly for the students and the institution itself. And then they rely on other means to get that game expertise in there so that students are developing their skill sets. Yeah, and I'm not too sure about that, but I think we're about a minute over time here. Um, I will say a lot of you guys who are on this call, you're NACE members, you guys get it. If you are talking to any of your peers in the NAI about esports, I encourage you to do so. Please share what your understanding, your process, how you went through this space, because I think the information that we've shared today is good, but it's aggregate information, right? It's averages, and details get lost in averages. I think the best information always comes from hearing from institutions from that ground level perspective of what went right, what went wrong, how'd you do it, and taking that information and making it unique and purposeful for your own campus. I always think that's the best information, and in part why I want to make sure JJ was on this call. But I think that's all the time we have. You got our contact information, or at least our email addresses. Please reach out if you have any questions. If you want this information, we will send it all to you, and we're happy to again follow up individually or in groups, whatever you prefer, in terms of any of that information or questions that you have. I'd like to thank you for the time. We had 101 participants in this. I think that's fantastic, and love seeing that. So obviously you can take that and think that a lot of people are thinking about esports right now, and that's a great place to be. So thank you everyone for your time. I know you got more places to go, and I won't keep you. Appreciate it, and thank you guys for all the kind words. We'll keep this open in case there's chats, but I know a lot of you are cycling out. Barry, I just got your message. Absolutely. Would love to see a picture of your space. That's fantastic.
Can you hear me or no?
Oh, we can hear you. Yeah, anyone could unmute themselves and talk.
Oh, great. Yeah, I have kind of an unorthodox space. Is this okay? I know there's about 18 people on. That's cool. Kind of an unorthodox space we're looking to renovate.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a meeting with some people tomorrow. It's basically kind of it's an older lecture hall, so it's kind of tiered.
Yeah.
And my concern is I've already bounced it off some other esports directors at other schools. It appears to be a great place for some competitions, but I'm not sure in practice the format and structure, because it's tiered, and it could be really cool on one hand, but it could be really dysfunctional on another. So I want to send you a couple pictures. I'll send them to you and JJ and maybe Emily, and you can weigh in on it, good or bad, because I know there's some challenges with it for sure. But
yep,
it's sometimes, the challenge is that's a space the faculty really don't really want anymore. And so sometimes getting space on campus is at a premium. And so it's a room available, and it's a place to start. But I don't know that if you're starting from scratch, if this is the room you'd pick. But I'll email it to you guys if that's okay.
Yeah, look, and Barry, I won't take up all your time here, because I know you got, everyone's got more to go with the NAIA convention, but you're not the only program that's used a lecture hall format with that tier system where you have, seats going up.
Yeah.
That it's actually, there's a number of institutions. It's the same dynamic as you said though, right? Space runs at a premium on campus, and so they're just taking what they can get, right? And it's you can do it. It has unique challenges. They're not insurmountable at all though, compared to like a flat room layout, right? You're kind of handcuffed a little bit by that tiered thing, but the good news is it's worked for other institutions.
Yeah, you'll see the pictures when I get it, but this is not even like a 1 foot stagger. These are old 19 whatever, a 50 tiered room where it's pretty steep.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Concrete kind of steps. Again, I'll send it to you, and then you guys can weigh in on it. That'd be very helpful. Both letting me know the positives and then the challenges it would pose.
Absolutely, happy to do that.
Thank you.
Provide as much input or help as we can.
Thank you. I'll send you those actually in like 5 minutes, the picture.
And again, I'm just keeping this open because I still see people here. So if there's questions or comments, you guys can either unmute yourself and ask, or if it's something you want to keep somewhat confidential, you could just direct message us on chat here or send us an email. And I saw we had the illustrious Jim Carr for a little bit in this session before. I'm sure he had to go and probably speaking at another session. So that was cool to see.
Thanks, Michael. I'll log off. Good presentation. We'll see you.
See you, Barry. We're coming down on the last few seconds, and then we're going to close this out. It's going to boot everyone, I believe. But I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully it's a good convention so far. I've heard good things about it from others, so that's fantastic. And just wish you guys all the best. Please feel free to reach out with anything. We'd love to hear it. And I guess the last thing I'll let you know is we're here to help. All right, well, everyone, take care. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the rest of the NAIA convention.